I held many positions with INROADS. I started with director of the Nashville affiliate, then I became a regional vice president, executive vice president, and in 93, from 1993 to 2005, became CEO, or served as CEO of INROADS during that period, from January of 1993 to about October 15th of 2005. Well, obviously there was a lot of change because when I became the managing director of the Nashville office, we only had 6 affiliates at that point. So Nashville was the first southern city that we started. It was my responsibility to start the southeastern affiliates of INROADS. So we were in a tremendous growth mode because I started in 1970, I think it was 1978 I started. And it was in a tremendous growth mode at that point. I was in charge of starting the southeastern cities. We had Mort Stanfield, who opened the northeastern cities. Lorenzo Tovar opened the western cities. So we were at a go point. As time went on, obviously the organization grew and became. Reginald Dixon was my predecessor, and his vision was that INROADS become a national organization. And we continued to grow. During the time I became CEO in 93, we got up to about 50 offices. One thing that was different and unique was that just as he thought or felt that INROADS could become a national organization, I felt that the model was exportable and could be an international organization. So we all opened an office in Mexico City. We opened an office in Toronto, Canada, an office in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, of all places. And we had a licensing agreement to employ the INROADS model in South Africa, in Johannesburg, South Africa. So it was an exciting time for the organization all around. At the time, INROADS was, as we continued to grow during the 80s, 90s, and into the early 2000s, INROADS became the largest organization of its kind in the country. We were, for years and years and years, we were considered one of the top 10 internship-related organizations in the country. As you said, the sponsoring company model was unique. Frank Carr, our founder, wanted us to have as much of a business-like approach to what we did in fulfilling our mission as possible. So the sponsoring companies paid a fee. It varied over the years, but let's say one year it may have been $4,000 per student. And what that fee covered was all the services that INROADS provided the students and the companies. So it covered our recruitment fees, our training, and our coaching. It covered all the interactions we had with the companies. And so it was almost like a fee for service, which was a differentiating model when you compare INROADS to other nonprofits at the time. So we did some fundraising, but the predominant amount of our funding came from the sponsorship fees, and it was a unique model at the time. Well, the main one by far was 9/11. It was just by far, in fact, all of our staff was, when 9/11 hit, all of our staff were down in Orlando, Florida, for a conference. And it was an amazing time. During the tragedy, we had to figure out as an organization how we were all going to get back home. We had people there from 50 different cities, and no flights were taken off. And ultimately, people literally some drove from Orlando to Seattle, Washington, from Orlando to California. I mean, it was an amazing thing to see the staff come together during that time. Now, unfortunately, it impacted us in a significant way because the whole economy froze during that time. Nobody was making any decisions, because they didn't know whether the terroristic threat was going to continue. And so we ultimately, for the first time in our history, had to do a major layoff. I think around the time of 9/11, we had over 300 employees within those locations that we operated. And unfortunately, over a period of a year or so, we had to lay off about half the staff and then rebuild the organization. And one of the things that I wanted to do before retiring as CEO was to demonstrate that the organization was back so that year over year we had net growth. It took a while to get back to year over year having net growth. So I wanted to make sure that we had growth in the number of interns at companies over year for a period of time before I decided that it was time for me to hang up my cleats, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah.
So to answer your question, 9/11 was the biggest challenge by far. By far, it was like a calling for all of us. It was our mission. I mean, we thought we were doing God's work, really. To diversify the ranks of corporate America. I tell people all the time it was the best thing that ever happened to me from a career perspective. It energized me. I felt that I had a purpose. I wouldn't have done it any differently. It still is a magnificent organization, but during those times in particular, it was just incredible what was happening. And when you look back now, I think there are over 30,000 alums. I said it back then that we literally were going to be, then I was saying that in the future, people were going to look up and say, where did all these people of color come from at senior levels in corporate America? The seeds were planted back in the 70s and the 80s and 90s, and you look around and you have all of these people doing incredible things. In fact, as you might know, the recently named head of TIAA CREF is an INROADS alum. We have a lot of stories like that around the country. And if somebody were to do some research on it, they say, oh my God, where did all these people come from? And a lot of them would have come through INROADS. Back then, when the organization was founded, people of color usually looked at, if they wanted professional careers, they looked at maybe teaching, they looked at being doctors, they looked at lawyers, things like that. Athletes, of course. But that was not a focus back then on going into the business world. Corporate America hadn't opened its doors that way. Corporate America had not been inviting people of color in that way. And so we changed we opened the door of career opportunities for people of color to look at business in a different way. People didn't look at accounting, they didn't look at finance, they didn't look at engineering, they didn't look at computer science as much as they looked at some of these other professions I mentioned. So we opened their eyes to other pathways that they may not have been familiar with, or their families may not have been familiar with. So it really, in a lot of ways, changed the face of not only communities of color, but like I said, corporate America. I thought about that, and I said, when I look back, the most impactful, I think, events were what we call the National Institutes. And that's when we would bring all of the interns together from all over the country. We had these institutes at University of Kansas, University of Tennessee, and other places. We had regional institutes, but we also had the nationals, where everybody came together. And I think one of the more impactful ones was when we had our 25th anniversary. And some other people might correct me, but I think the 25th anniversary, I think the celebration was in Chicago. And it was an incredible event. It was just incredible to see. So the 25th was for, I think, and other people might correct me because it's been a long time ago. I think there were all of the students and staff, but it may have just been staff. I really can't remember, but anyway, my memory tells me that it was just such an energizing event. I remember we planted a tree at a park in honor of Frank Carr, founder. So I guess for me, the lasting memories were when I would be able to look around and see all of the talent, the interns and the staff and the alumni, all in the same place, celebrating success, reinvigorating each other, patting each other on the back. It was like a movement. It was like a quiet movement when I look back.
Yeah.
Nobody ever knew, I don't think, the impact that INROADS was going to have. We felt it, but we didn't know it was going to be as impactful as it has become. So those were the times by far, because it's just the energy that you felt again, being with staff, alumni, students, all being supportive of the same vision and mission of the organization. And just about any alum that you talk to would say that INROADS was a life-changing experience. That's what I think, bar none, they would say it was a life-changing experience because of the exposure they had at an early age. And see, that's the thing that, a lot of organizations don't realize. We had some students in INROADS who were with INROADS from the 9th grade all the way through college. So you just imagine that being a part of something that long. So it was literally life-changing. It introduced them to careers and people they probably would have never met. And so it gave them the foundational tools to compete in the broader corporate world. And so I think, and I hope that you're able to talk to a lot of alums, you will certainly feel the passion that comes from them about what INROADS did for them and their families, and the continuing passion that they have. You have some alums who are older than I am. I turned 67 this year. There are some alums who are 70 years old. What we would do is recruit students as high school graduating seniors, college freshmen, and college sophomores. And we would the staff would literally go to different high schools and communities across the country, make presentations about INROADS, the INROADS, what we call the INROADS process. And in the early days, we called it the INROADS program, but it morphed into describing it as the INROADS process. And so we would proselytize. Like I said, we go to high schools, we go to colleges, we talk about INROADS, we talk about the companies that were involved, we talk about alumni, we talked about what they would have to do to be a participant, what it would take to be a participant, and what they'd have to do to stay a participant, because INROADS had very rigorous standards. Not only did you have to do well academically, but you had to attend the training sessions that we had on the weekends, and you had to attend the coaching sessions with your INROADS coordinators. So that's how we did it. We went out. Now, of course, with times having changed, there's a lot more social media outreach, but I would imagine that people are still beating the pavement to kind of find this talent, because now, there are a lot more competitive organizations out there than there were. INROADS was the only game in town for years and years and years and years. And so there are a lot of organizations out there now who have tried to copy the INROADS process. I don't think there'll ever be another INROADS, but there are others out there trying to copy the process. It was incredible. Those parents, would show up on Saturdays when we had parent sessions, and if the kid got in trouble, we could talk to the parent and say, look, Joe over there has been missing Saturday sessions, and Joe didn't miss any more Saturday sessions after we talked to a parent. So, because we had parent orientations also. So because INROADS was such a demanding organization, I mean, we used to have workshops just about every Saturday during the summer, and we'd have them occasionally during the fall and winter. But I mean, the amount of discipline that these young people had to demonstrate at a young age, like I said, some started with us as early as the 9th grade, right? The majority of them started with us in high school as graduating seniors from high school. Just imagine at 17, 18 years old, you being dedicated enough to spend just about every Saturday during the summer in an INROADS workshop. I knew I didn't have that. If INROADS had been around when I grew up, I wouldn't have had that discipline. You're not going to tell me I'm not going to be on the basketball court somewhere on a Saturday, or chasing after some young lady on a Saturday. When I was growing, no, I would. INROADS, the discipline that we required was incredible, incredible, and I don't think that there was anything like it then, and it's probably nothing like it now. And you'll find this for a lot of people. INROADS, from a career perspective, was the best thing that ever happened to me in my entire life. There's nothing even close. There's not even a close second, okay? It was the best thing that happened to me in my entire life. I woke up every day with a mission, and I'm in my own way trying to help change the world, trying to diversify the leadership of corporate America. It was a passion. It was tough on me. It was tough on my family. I was on the road a lot. But if somebody gave me that, and the interesting story that nobody really knows about is the way I got introduced to INROADS was on Thanksgiving Day of 1977. That's how Frank Carr called me. I was a bachelor at the time. I was living in an apartment. And I thought it was a crank call because I said, who in the world would call somebody about a job on Thanksgiving Day, right? And he called me on Thanksgiving Day, and he convinced me that it was when he mentioned the person who had referred him to me. When he did that, I said, oh, okay, this must be legitimate, because the person who referred Frank to me was an attorney at Fisk University, which was my alma mater. So I said, okay, if Attorney Petway referred Frank to me, this guy must be legitimate. And so after that, I had the interview 7 or 8 times, and Frank was famous for having these interviews. He was testing you. So he was famous for having these breakfast interviews at 6:30 in the morning. I am not a morning person, never have been, never will be.
It's pretty
And
rough.
like I said, at the time I was a bachelor, so my mother, I'm a grown man, even though I'm a bachelor, my mother would have to call me to make sure I got up for these interviews with Frank Carr at 6:30 for breakfast. And so I said to myself, if I ever became CEO, one thing I would not do is have a 6:30 breakfast meeting. For all who will hear this, it was the best thing that ever happened to me in my career, bar none. And INROADS has made an indelible print on this country. And it really has. And you probably have heard about the fact that there's an INROADS alum started something in Australia called Career Trackers, which is nothing but INROADS, but it's embedded in Australia. So that shows you the global impact that this organization has had and continues to have. It all came from one man's dream. One man's dream. You know, Frank attended the March on Washington, heard I Have a Dream speech, and he's changed thousands of lives. I mean, thousands of lives, because he attended that March on Washington and I heard I Have a Dream speech. So just imagine one man hearing one speech, changing thousands of lives and changing generations of lives because of his belief in what INROADS could do to this country or for this country.